Nucleus, right. The eukaryotic cells have a nucleus, this membrane that surrounds and protects their DNA, their chromosomes, and prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus. Their chromosome just drifts around inside the cytoplasm, inside the cell. But you can also list 4 things that all cells, whether they're prokaryotic or eukaryotic cells, have, and that was a cell membrane. They've all got a cell membrane. They all have a cytoplasm, which is the watery liquid that fills up the cell. They all have 1 or more chromosomes, and they all have ribosomes. Those are the big 4 similarities of all cells on Earth. Okay, what I want to now do is focus on membranous organelles. Membranous organelles are organelles that are made out of membrane. I guess I mentioned one already. The nucleus is a membranous organelle. But a lot of the other organelles you find inside eukaryotic cells, like this one and this one and this one, and these ones, are also membranous organelles. And that was another distinction between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells have membranous organelles, and prokaryotic cells do not. That's not the defining difference. The defining difference is the presence or absence of the nucleus. But another difference is whether they have membranous organelles or not. Now, prokaryotic cells can have non-membranous organelles, like the ribosome is a good example. Both prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells have those, but only eukaryotic cells have membranous organelles. Okay, so so everything I'm going to be talking now is membranous organelles, so it only applies to eukaryotic cells. And let's start off with the nucleus, since we kind of mentioned that one already. So it is a membranous organelle that surrounds and protects the DNA. It kind of always made sense to me that you might want to protect the DNA if you were a cell, because that is your control center. That's where all your vital protein recipes reside, and you don't want anything bad happening to it. So you should lock it in a vault, so to speak, to give it some extra protection. Here's a close-up of the nucleus. An interesting thing about the nucleus is it's not just made out of a membrane, it's made out of a double membrane, meaning 2 phospholipid bilayers. This inner one right here is 1 complete phospholipid bilayer, and the one out there is a second complete phospholipid bilayer. Now why 2 phospholipid bilayers instead of just 1? I'm not sure. It might be just for more added protection to protect the DNA even more. Okay, there's a close-up of it. You can see the two phospholipid bilayers of the nucleus. The nucleus has holes in it, which are called nuclear pores. I guess spell that out here. That's so things can get in and out of the nucleus. In particular, the messenger RNAs have to be able to get out of the nucleus to get to the ribosomes. Alrighty, well, moving outward, the next membranous organelle that we find in eukaryotic cells is called the endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER for short. And the endoplasmic reticulum is all this stuff right here, this stuff and this stuff and this stuff right here that's around the nucleus. There we go. And so the ER is a membranous organelle, and I described it here as a series of compartments, or you might think of it as a series of tubes or a cave-like structure that is an extension of, connected to the nucleus's outer membrane. So let's see. So the walls of the ER are made out of phospholipid bilayer, but they're hollow inside. They're like little caves. So think of this as like a watery environment all inside the ER, but the walls of it are phospholipid bilayer. And the outer of the two nucleus's membranes is continuous with and connected to the endoplasmic reticulum, in the same sense that your arm is continuous with and connected to your hand. There's no sharp border between your arm and your hand. One flows directly into the other. Same thing, the outer membrane of the nucleus is connected to and flows and becomes the endoplasmic reticulum. All right, now, if you look closely at the ER in this diagram, you can see that it has two different regions. The part that's closer to the nucleus has kind of a more rough appearance, and that's called the rough endoplasmic reticulum, or just the rough ER for short. And the part that's a little bit further away from the nucleus looks a little bit more smooth, this part right here, and that's called the smooth ER. Maybe I should tell you what the endoplasmic reticulum does. If I just sum it up in just a few words, I would say it is the cell's manufacturing center. It's like a factory inside the cell for making molecules that the cell needs. And to be a little bit more specific, the rough ER is the manufacturing center for proteins. It's where the ribosomes piece the proteins together. And the smooth ER is the manufacturing center for lipids. It's where the cell puts together new lipids. Let's start off with the rough ER, since it's a little bit closer to the nucleus and the DNA and stuff that we've just been talking about. All right. So there's a chromosome, and those are supposed to be some ribosomes floating around outside the nucleus. Notice that the ribosomes are stationed on the sides of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Before, when I was showing you the ribosome, I just sort of showed it floating around in the cytoplasm somewhere about here. And there are some ribosomes that do just float around in the cytoplasm. But the majority of ribosomes are parked on the outside of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. As a matter of fact, that's why it has its rough appearance. All these little dots on here that give it the rough appearance are, in fact, individual ribosomes that are parked there. Now, how many ribosomes are actually on the rough ER? Well, it probably depends on what type of cell you're talking about. I don't really know. But I would estimate at least thousands of ribosomes are clustered all over the outside of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. When a messenger RNA exits the nucleus from one of those nuclear pores, it will eventually bump into a ribosome. And so most of the time that means it's a ribosome that's attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So the ribosome does what ribosomes do, which is link together amino acids to make a protein. But notice that ribosome stuffed the protein into the interior of the rough ER. And I'll run that back a little bit. There we go. So remember that the interior of the endoplasmic reticulum is a hollow, watery compartment, and these ribosomes are able to jam the newly formed protein into the interior. So now this newly made protein is floating around inside the interior of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. And once it's inside the rough endoplasmic reticulum, the newly made protein will continue to just sort of drift around inside there. But eventually, it's going to make its way further outward and go to the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, this part of the ER that's further away from the nucleus. Now, what's going to happen to it when the newly made protein arrives at the smooth ER? Well, I'll have to leave you in suspense. I'll answer that question in a few minutes when it does arrive at the smooth ER. But while it's traveling in that direction, let's zoom in on the smooth ER and see what's going on there in the meantime. Okay, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, farther from the nucleus, and it is the lipid manufacturing center for the cell, where all the new lipids are made. And so, lipids have to be pieced together from smaller molecules. And what type of molecule does tasks like piece together smaller molecules? Protein, good. But what type of protein? What type of protein carries out chemical reactions? Enzymes, yes. Enzymes are the proteins that link together molecules, or I should say enzymes are proteins that carry out chemical reactions, and linking together molecules counts as a chemical reaction because you're changing molecules. Alrighty, so inside the smoothie there are enzymes that link together glycerol and fatty acids and phosphate groups for phospholipids, and the building blocks of steroids to make all of those different types of lipids. What type of lipid is this? Phospholipid. Yay. What type of lipid are, I don't know, these? Supposed to be a triglyceride, right. That's supposed to be the glycerol, and the three wavy things are supposed to be the three fatty acids that are attached to the glycerol, and these are steroids, right, because they got that steroid backbone. There's steroids in there. So triglycerides are being made there. It's just full of enzymes that are cranking out all the types of lipid molecules that we talked about from the monomers, like the glycerols and the fatty acids and things. Now, I don't really have a picture of it here, but in addition to the enzymes that make new lipids, the smoothie R also has enzymes that detoxify harmful substances. I don't know the complete list of all the harmful substances that get detoxified there, but alcohol and other types of drugs are toxic substances in your body, and they get detoxified by enzymes that float around inside the smoothie R. I remember reading that people who are alcoholics or drug abusers, if you look at their cells under a microscope, they have enlarged smooth endoplasmic reticulums because they need to be constantly doing more detoxification reactions than you or I would do. Okay, now remember, let's get back to that protein. The newly made proteins get assembled by ribosomes on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and those newly made proteins get stuffed into the